Now, Sports Talk with Brodes. Here's Hunter Brody.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome on into Sports Talk with Brodes. Now, this is weird for me. This is very odd. I'm actually recording this the next morning. Very rarely does that happen, but that 10 o'clock start just murdered me on Saturday night. For some reason, I honestly believe it was due to how many foul calls were called in that third quarter. 19 foul calls. How many technicals were delivered to the 76ers? It was a nightmare scenario. So I was dozing. My eyes got heavy. And I drank a large iced Dunkin' Donuts French vanilla iced coffee around 7 o'clock. So when I started to really nod, what was going on? It was hard for me to comprehend. But yeah, very rare for me to do this. I couldn't do it any longer, though. I tried my best. And here's the positive. You don't have 10 o'clock starts anymore. The next, you get hit against the Denver Nuggets with 9, but 9 is significantly better than that 10 o'clock start. And it was one of those games, too. Let's be realistic. It was one of those games where the Sixers were not involved, and they were due for one of these. And I also feel that there was a big storyline behind this tilt, which played a role in the way that the Clippers came out and honestly controlled the basketball game. There was so much drama and stories behind what happened last season with the Clippers and Doc Rivers. Paul George goes on a podcast. He says he wasn't like how he was utilized. He brought up Ray Allen's name with pin downs and things of that nature. So he somewhat took a shot at Doc Rivers. And whether someone admits it or doesn't admit it publicly, Doc Rivers hears that. My point I'm trying to make is there seemed to be a little bit of some feistiness involved between the two to try and make a statement. Doc Rivers wants to prove to them, yo, jerk-offs, you were wrong. And the team, the way the Sixers team is constructed right now and emotionally playing so well, it's I want to have my coaches back. So they tried their best. The problem is they ran out of gas. They didn't have Joel Embiid. Their defense got shredded a bit. Seth Curry with a tough day at the office, and more on that as we continue because Daryl Morey made some statements at the trade deadline that maybe it is about Seth Curry. I talked about it being about Furkan Korkmaz and the addition helping the bench, but maybe there's something to the Seth Curry thing as well. But more on that as we continue this conversation. The intensity between the two parties was there. Emotionally, physically, mentally. And when you have Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, when Mike Scott's playing the 5, and when your defense is getting torched, well, yeah, you're probably going to have the night that you did. Tobias Harris was a dog. What do the kids say these days? He was in his bag. Wow. How about that kick out to Danny Green? I almost fell over. The hell was that? That was beautiful. You just see all of this new things that Tobias Harris is adding into his game, whether it's the stellar defense, more broad approach here, but the stellar defense, the assist numbers. He had 6 assists in this game. That wasn't what stood out to me the most. It was just the way that he was getting into the mid-post, taking the advantage of the mismatches, something I scream about Ben Simmons not doing enough. Tobias Harris is doing all the time. You heard Doc Rivers on the bench, on the sideline, screaming at the team, yo, get Tobias Harris that mismatch. Set the screen, get Toby to where he needs to be, and allow him to go to work. Allow him to make the play that he feels comfortable making in that possession. And Tobias Harris was all over the map, kissing it off the glass. Tough shots from about 10 feet away. Guys in his face, and he shoots over them. All over the place. And it was a magnificent watch. 13 of 19 from the field with 29 points. He was one of the big reasons why you were involved at half, along with Danny Green. Danny Green early, bang, 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 right? Knocking down threes. Cooled off a bit after that, but he finished with 5 threes. It's big to note that he is continuing to play really well. Danny Green is rolling, and he is feeling it, and he's got the swag right now. Both of those two players. And that's very important, right? Even though they come out with a loss, and they were due for a loss, and it was inevitable that eventually, without Joel Embiid, even though it seemed impossible, right? They were going to win every single game outside of that Bucks one. They were going to win every game. Even though it felt, even though it felt as a joke that they could win no matter what. If Dwight Howard gets kicked out, it doesn't matter. If you have to start Tony Bradley, it doesn't matter. That's how it was rocking. Eventually, it was inevitable. They were going to have a game where they didn't have enough juice. And that's exactly what we witnessed. Now, I mentioned Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard gets kicked out of this game as well. Doc Rivers was not happy with what happened against the Lakers and with Harrell. And maybe there was something to be said about Dwight Howard taking the offense or the initiative to try and play tough against Harrell, because that was how the Lakers decided to fill that hole in Dwight. When they made offseason moves, they picked up Harrell. That was a big acquisition, and that took a part of what Dwight Howard was with Los Angeles during their run. So we had a bit of a game where he wanted to show, yo, I'm here, baby, right? And it backfired. Doc Rivers called him a fool, called him clowns, actually. Clowns was the word that was utilized. In this game, I wouldn't say it was to the same level of that, at least to the eye. Now, he said something and then bang, gets kicked out of the game. But that is a little foolish. I'm going to use that term out of Dwight. I mentioned this prior, time and awareness. You got to realize you don't have the big man. You're very limited. You're going with Mike Scott. And I was surprised that maybe B-Ball Paul didn't have more opportunity. Maybe it had to do against the matchup. Not that Mike Scott was doing some phenomenal job by any means, but when you go up against Kawhi, Paul George, and when they're exploding and taking advantage of mismatches and using their size and speed and their ability to knock down shots, maybe B-Ball Paul isn't the best time, or it's not the best time to use somebody like that. The way that they signed him to the contract, though, and made such a big statement towards him, it is a little surprising. You made that move for a reason. You are limited in options. You don't have Dwight Howard in the game, Mike Scott. Why aren't you putting him out there more? I don't know. Not that that was the difference in this game by any means. It's not the difference in this game, Paul Reed. Getting back to the Dwight Howard side of things, though, that's where that big bumpy ride comes into play. When he's on and he's giving you double-doubles and he's grabbing you 12 rebounds, multiple of them being on the offensive side of the glass, and he's putting back rebounds, and maybe you throw a couple alley-oops there with the pick-and-roll game, with the two-man game with Dwight Howard, that's when he's at his best. But then he has all these dips and all these lows where you have to be better. You have to be smarter. I don't care if the referees were bad, which they were. I don't care if they pulled the trigger early on kicking somebody out. Don't put yourself in that situation. Back-to-back games, as much as I could sit here and blame the refs for such a horrible job and all the ticky-tackness and taking away the flow of the basketball game, they made it so choppy. They made it a snooze fest. They made it boring. Dwight, you still put your body in a position where they can have the chance to blow the whistle, get your ass out into the locker room, and you got to be smarter. You're supposed to be that veteran leader, that voice, and that leadership that people look at and say, this is the guy that we should be following. This is the guy that we should be listening to. And when you do silly things in games like this, does that take away the power of your voice? And now when you say things, it's, all right, but Dwight, come on, Dwight. Does that ever cross anyone's mind in that locker room? I think it's a reasonable question to ask. I mentioned the offensive side of the glass. Yeah, they were getting beat up in that area early, and that was something that hurt. Now, they started out hot. It was like, wow, Toby, Danny Green, as I alluded to, and then here comes the Clippers. They seem to get back on track during that first quarter, and then the Sixers were down a couple points at the second quarter when it ended. The first half ended. That third was something. That third was kind of where things got out of hand, and it got a bit wonky for sure. How about Mann? Got everywhere on the floor. I need a sip of coffee real quick. I always do this, though. I need a sip of coffee. I need a sip of coffee. I do this a lot on Coffee with Brodes, to be fair, but I need this Timmy Hortons in my life. Oh, it's amazing. So Mann got everywhere. The guy averages 5.5 points per game, but he ends up releasing a 23-point performance. Why does this always happen? I don't know. There always seems to be a dude that ends up having his way. But it goes back to correlating that with the defense and how sloppy it truly was. The Clippers shot 53% from the floor, and they shot 42% from three. They made 11 threes. You weren't keeping up with that pace. You couldn't have Furkan Korkmaz being able to knock down shots. By the way, Furkan, against a more serious squad here, tough day at the office. 0 for 4 with about 12, 13 minutes. This is my fear when it comes to Korkmaz against better teams, better opponents, more legit squads. This is the Korkmaz I would imagine you are going to be seeing more so than the one that scores 22 against a team that isn't as much as a firepower type of team. The Clippers are good. The Clippers are legit. They have a serious unit together with Ty Lue. And I'm interested to see how that dynamic works as things intensifies and as adjustments need to be made and things of that nature because of how they bitched about Doc Rivers last season. They didn't have Rajon Rondo either, and that's such a different piece to how that offense is going to run and how he's going to be able to distribute the basketball to his teammates. So you have something that you didn't even see that's going to make this Clippers team even better. But they really do have solid structure, and they have the type of pieces. I'm not a big Paul George guy. I think he's obviously a better talent in this league, but there's a reason why he has had the struggles that he has had in some of the postseason positions that he was in the past. Kawhi's a dog, though. We've seen that firsthand, and when you have a dog, you can make up for flaws in other areas, and is it possible that Kawhi can help Paul George's flaws not look as bad? He's a guy where not the most efficient in the world, and he can get a little ugly. Can Kawhi save that? Can someone like Rondo save that? Do they have enough around that where Paul George on some of his off nights, which do get hideous, his off nights in the playoffs get abysmal. Can you make up for that with everything else surrounding you? I don't think you can rely on Mann to get you 23, though. Let's get to Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons fouled out. He had 6 fouls, the 6th one. A little tough. You're trying to be a little tough with just in general with setting some screens and all. And we mentioned how the 5 position played out. Ben Simmons, you saw Tobias Harris, honestly. They went positionless basketball to an extreme with Toby getting thrown out there. But when he's your hot hand, when he's the guy that's contributing the most offensively, realistically, besides him and Shake Milton, I mentioned Danny Green's threes, but you can't rely on him to be a guy that can go out there and create for himself. You need to have him camping out in the corner, but he needs other people to go to work, and then he's the guy that sits there wide open to cash in and make a nice bucket for you. Yeah, Tobias Harris, you got to put the rock in his hands and allow him to operate. Besides him and Shake Milton ended up with 16 points on 10 shots, more of an efficient night for Shake. Didn't start out the prettiest, but he got into rhythm after that. You didn't have much. Now, Ben, he did foul out. He tried to play a little physical with some screen setting. He had 6 turnovers. That's where I think I was bothered the most, going up against a team like the Clippers and knowing what type of talent is on the other side. 6 turnovers, I'm starting to get uncomfortable with the ball handling and the lack of keeping the ball in the possession of the 76ers as of late. Now, what I'm going to do is bring up the Ben Simmons game log just to see how it has been over the last couple of games here in the turnover department. 6 last game, 7 against the Lakers. Yeah, okay, I knew it wasn't just the eye test. I knew it was legitimate. 6 in the game against the Clippers, 7 against the Lakers. He did have 2 against Golden State, but 7 against the Knicks and 7 against Milwaukee. So when you're playing Milwaukee, the Lakers, the Clippers, and even the Knicks, 7-7, 7-6. When you're playing premier talent, and the Lakers didn't even have premier talent, so shame on me. They didn't even have Anthony Davis. They didn't even have LeBron James. So what is going on with Ben? Trying to do too much? Is this a product of not having Joel Embiid out there? Because now there's more possessions for Ben to run up and down with the open floor game, and he's trying to make plays happen. He's trying to hit guys on the fast break. He's looking for his teammates in the corner. Now that is his mentality, and he doesn't have the ability to dump it into Joel Embiid as much, is there a correlation between that and the turnovers happening? Yeah, I would imagine so. Offensively speaking, scoring-wise, he had some dunks in there, some powerful ones too, that he exploded at the rim. I just thought his offensive performance was a little choppy. That's at least how it felt to me throughout the game, where he did have some nice cuts and some nice takes to the basket, but it was just here and there, and it was periodically thrown in there throughout the game where his point total and his efficiency was a little quiet for what the box score said. Turnovers more noticeable, failing out more noticeable, and I would like to see more out of Ben Simmons. There was a lineup by Doc Rivers I hated. I literally hated, and I hope to never see it again. And I think it does more have to do with the product of the surroundings more so than something that he's legitimately looking at. Ben Simmons, Shake Milton, Matisse Thybulle, Mike Scott, and Dwight Howard. Please, Doc Rivers, can we never see this again? Please, I beg of you. Matisse Thybulle did have some nice perimeter blocks, though. How about that one on Paul George? Oh. Good luck. The explosiveness of Matisse Thybulle anywhere on the floor defensively is just a magical thing to watch. Just like I'm sure watching myself drink Timmy Hortons is a magical thing to watch. And if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any other podcasting platform, then you just didn't watch me take a nice fat sip of coffee and let it hit my lips. You just heard a little bit of silence. And by the way, all the podcasts that I do, they're on audio platforms as well. So go make sure you subscribe to that. Real quickly, before we hop into the Anytime Hotline, the tournament is in full swing, and the action has not disappointed. Are you kidding me? Villanova, I really wish they could have made it farther, but we knew the circumstances were going to limit them. Oral Roberts almost squeaked it out against Arkansas. Really good look at the buzzer. Wasn't able to do it, though. So many great storylines. DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app, is putting new customers in the center of the action. Turn $1 into $100. That's 100-to-1 odds. Pick any college basketball team that's still in the hunt for your shot at winning $100. All it takes is $1 bet, and that team winning their next game. Download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app and use promo code Brodes when you sign up to turn $1 into $100. If that college basketball team of your choosing pulls off the win, that's code Brodes to turn $1 into $100 for a limited time only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Must be 21 or older. Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Restrictions apply. In partnership with Meadows Racetrack and Casino. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Real quickly, though, I was going to go to the Anytime Hotline, and we are still going to, but I did want to bring up that Daryl Morey, Seth Curry thing. The George Hill acquisition is going to be so monstrous for late-game situations. And Daryl Morey stressed that he does not want to have a defensive liability out there where in the playoffs teams can take a switch where they want to and exploit that and look at it, lick their lips, lick their chops, and just attack constantly. There are guys that their offense outweighs their defense. Seth Curry, to me, if he's hot, is one of those players, is that guy where you are going to need spacing. You are going to need the ability to knock down shots. But when you look at a George Hill, he can do that as well. He can space the floor. George Hill can do everything. He can ball handle, he can shoot the three, and he can defend. So with that being said, he's shooting 38% in his 14 games this season. Limited sample size. 384 is his, so 38.4% is his career average in such a long period of time. I'm just comparing Seth Curry's three-point shooting average to George Hill. So Seth Curry is 43%. So there is a dip there in the shooting. Still pretty damn solid, though, at a George Hill touching close to 39%. Would you sacrifice the difference in three-point shooting to gain that physicality defensively, to gain that lack of mismatch defensively by throwing George Hill out there. I never thought that they would tinker with the starting lineup to start. Maybe eventually they would have to make adjustments when they see things are not working. But I always looked at what they did when everyone was healthy. They continued to throw the starting lineup out there of Ben, Green, Curry, Tobias, and Embiid, and they were winning a ton of basketball games. But when you watch Seth Curry get exposed, and when you hear Daryl Morey, the president of basketball operations, mention he doesn't want that just a day or two prior, you're going to see George Hill with the starters coming down the stretch, one, because of Ben Simmons and his inability to be effective and efficient in half-court sets, and two, the defensive side of things. So will that change Seth Curry's role? Will that add to your bench? What does that do for Shake Milton's role? Because in theory, George Hill being that primary ball handler off the bench would allow Shake Milton to be more of that guy that can just go make buckets and be that scorer, take it to the rim. You don't have to slow things down and have the offense be your main priority. If Shake Milton is thinking about, I got to set up this offense and that has to be what I do, I think you lose what Shake Milton can do so well, and that's just score the rock, worry about being the scorer, worry about taking it to the rack. He gets it close. He definitely does go downhill, and he'll kiss it off the glass. He can finish with different ways, different versatility. He can use the rim as protection and go underneath the basket and touch it off the glass. So there's a lot he can do. What would Seth Curry being that guy on the bench do to someone like Shake Milton? We've seen Seth Curry with the rock in his hands, but I don't feel very comfortable with that. As much as I don't think Shake is the guy, weirdly enough, I feel better with him having the ball in his hands than I do a Seth Curry. And the rotations, I'm just hypothetically speaking and throwing things out there and seeing what sticks. I'm just kind of speaking out loud, if you will. There's obviously a lot into that conversation, way more context to dive into, but I'm just thinking aloud here on what that would exactly mean. But I'm not ruling anything out with the usage of George Hill because of the statements made out of Daryl Morey, and I think that there's going to be some interesting switches that occur and interesting dynamics that's going to be implemented to this team as you see playoff basketball enter the conversation, which just tickles my fancy. All right, let's shoot it over to your thoughts on this game.
It's fine to be disappointed with the outcome, but at the same time, you just have to realize what a weird, crazy game this was. The refereeing in the third quarter was beyond atrocious, and Dwight Howard getting thrown out definitely did not help any comeback hopes. But at the same time, you would be pissed off with that too. It's really just hard to find a rhythm or make any type of effort when there's a foul being called every 20 seconds. That being said, their defense, in terms of defending three-point shots, was pretty lackluster, and I think they allowed way too many turnovers and fast break points to occur.
Oh, they definitely did. Oh, they definitely did. They just allowed that team to beat them. You know, they just allowed that team to go out there and but it makes sense, though, right? Like, I don't want to sit here and be like, well, I'm okay that they lost, but when you stack those wins together without Joel and you go on such a nice run and then you play a team that is looked at as a squad that can make a serious run in the postseason, this is why, when you see this game play out, this is what we all thought prior to the nice, exciting run without Joel Embiid, that this is what it was going to look like more times than not without the big fella. Now, they surprised us, and they proved us wrong, and they're going out there trying to make statements like, hey, we are a serious team without Embiid, and we're going to make sure that you understand that by the time that Embiid comes back, you're going to see our record, and you're going to be pleasantly very happy with it. But this is what we expected for a reason, because in the NBA, when you have this type of talent that you're going up against, they're going to make sure that you feel the pain of not having Joel Embiid. The Lakers didn't have Anthony Davis and didn't have LeBron James. If they had those two healthy and the Sixers didn't have LeBron James, I think you would see a similar performance that you saw out of some of these Clippers players that you would with LeBron and AD, and maybe we don't feel the same way about where we are right now without the big man, but yeah, you know, like, this is what it was supposed to look like. This is why we said in a 10-game span, if they go 6-4 or 5-5 prior to seeing it happen, well, it makes a lot of sense.
This was a tough one tonight. Clippers played very well on both ends of the floors. I'd like to get your opinion on what you think that could be pitfalls for the Sixers offense. I believe they do very well on fast break and open court transitions, which didn't happen tonight. They either drive, kick out for threes. Those didn't happen tonight. They like to dump the ball to Embiid or Harris on the block to go one-on-one. That wasn't enough tonight. But the third quarter, when they had to run the half-court set, that was a little rough to watch. They just couldn't get anything going. I was kind of hoping to see Ben, shine a little bit more, but, it didn't really work out tonight. And I'd love to hear your opinion on what they can do to improve that half-court set when at times like this, it gets really hard to get points.
Yeah, well, that's a great question, by the way. And that's going to be the question in playoffs. It really is. Yeah, they thrive. They absolutely thrive majority of the time in the open court. That's what Ben Simmons excels at. That's when he's the most magnificent version of himself, when he has all the time and space in the world to go downhill at 6'10" with that speed and that ball handling, and he's got guys running with him, camping out in the corner, bang, he drives, you got to make a decision, you kick it out, and that's what they do. That's when he operates at the highest clip, is in that open court. And that is why I sit here and question what this team can possibly do. To look better in the half-court sets, it comes down to Tobias Harris and Joel Embiid. Because in half-court sets, you got to expect your best players to win one-on-one matchups. Go make a play. Get in a position that you feel comfortable with. And sure, there's plays that are ran to help players get into certain positions. There's things that you can do to open up space for certain players and to allow for a cut to happen backdoor. There's things that can happen in the half-court sets to allow these players to give them a little bit more of an advantage. But for the most part, it's win your battle, right? Win your one-on-one matchup. Joel Embiid might be getting double-teamed. Well, if that's the double team that's going to occur, make sure you win that battle. That one won't be one-on-one, but that'll be a battle your player has to win. And to win that battle, you kick out to a wide-open player, and then you have to deliver and make your shot. But to answer your question, what do they need to do? They're going to have to rely on Tobias Harris and Joel Embiid to do what they do. Whether it's Joel Embiid facing up or Joel Embiid posting up, or if it's Tobias Harris posting up, because there's something to this mid-post game that he continues to thrive with, and he wants to get that spot on the floor. Every time down the floor, every trip, he tries to establish himself right there, and the Sixers dump it in, and they say, Tobias, make it happen, man. Go do it. Go get your bucket. Go get that mid-range jumper. Do the fadeaway. Do what you do best and score the 2 points, whether there's a guy in your face or not. And that's what it's going to come down to. You're going to have to ask them to operate that way constantly and be able to deliver constantly, and that's how you're going to have to score your points. And here's the good thing. If they do that, eventually a team is going to have to make an adjustment and say, we can't allow Tobias to continue this. We're going to have to double him. Or we're going to have to double Joel. Whoever's that hot night and whoever it's going to be, imagine doubling Tobias and then leaving, that's going to make things a little, that's going to be a tough, that's why if they can do it, you're going to have a really tough decision to make, and that's going to open up the floor for others to be able to make something happen. But once that occurs, the double teaming, and now things open up in other areas where, all right, now you're not demanding that player to do the same thing. Still have to make the right play and put it in right areas and help out your team with good passing or beat the double team at times. I could see that happening as well. But to answer your question, that's what they're going to have to do. I'm fascinated to see it.
What's going on, Brodes? Tough loss. I don't know what's going on with Dwight, but he's got to simmer down. Back-to-back games, really? I mean, L.A. really doesn't like him. Clippers game, Lakers game, gets thrown out both times. Ben fouling out. He was impressive. He was playing pretty well. Oh man, when Marcus Morris, I think it was. I don't even remember who it was. He got up into him, pissed Ben off, and he went right down the court and slammed it home. Oh, I mean, I wish he would play like that every possession, just pissed. Go to the rim like you got Reggie Jackson on you. You're 6'10". Just take it to the rim. Dunk on him. It's not that hard.
I scream about it all the time, dude. I really do. That's the most frustrating part about Ben. It's there. We're not screaming. See, it would be different if, let's say TJ McConnell. If we sat here every day and screamed for TJ McConnell to be more aggressive and go downhill and get to the rack, we'd be morons. We'd be idiots. But asking Ben Simmons to do it every possession, Joel Embiid is aggressive every possession. Every time we go down the floor with Joel Embiid, what's he want? Give me the fucking ball, dude. Give me the ball. I'm going to go. I'm going to go to town. His mentality every trip is, I'm going to dominate. Ben Simmons every single time down the floor doesn't have it, and that's why I think we feel the way that we do when we watch Ben Simmons perform. I wish he was able to have that mentality of screw you every single trip. To your point on Dwight Howard, I don't know what's gotten into him, but this is who he is at the same time. We knew that. He was this goofy character. He was this wonky guy. So you got to take the good with the bad. The good is going to be magnificent. The bad is going to be this. This is the bad. You're going to have to take it because this is somewhat of the identity of Dwight Howard to this point. The pros are, wow, you have probably the best big man situation behind Joel Embiid that you could imagine. The bad, he's getting beat. He's getting into the face of people. He brings the toughness. And I think the toughness is going to be crucial for playoff moments. But you got to tinker with that line. If that toughness overdoes it, and then now you're waking up a beast on the other side, or you're crossing the line, you're getting technical fouls, you're giving the team an advantage because you're going over that line emotionally, well then, yeah, you can't have that happen. And if I'm a betting man, I would imagine in a playoff series that's going to happen. But if 3 times it ends up helping you out and 1 time it crushes you, you're going to have to take the good with the bad. The problem is, what if it's 2-2? If it's 500, if Dwight Howard bats 500, if you will, how does that get displayed? And how do people digest that? Is that a positive? Is that a negative? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
All right, what's up? I'm here after the Sixers lose to the Clippers, and that was a biased game where the refs wanted the Clippers to win that game badly. I bet you $500 you want the Clippers to win that game. That third quarter, that was terrible. So many fouls. Probably the longest quarter of all time. Yeah, this game, I think it was a decent game. I mean, the Clippers, they were making all their shots. I think there was too many fouls in the game. Dwight Howard got ejected again, bro. These refs are terrible. I hope somebody on the post game right now starts ripping the refs.
Well, yeah, I think the refs were a hot item afterwards, but I don't think the Sixers lost because of the refs. I think the Sixers lost because they didn't have enough firepower. It looks like they're getting a little bit fatigued on the defensive end. Maybe it has something to do with this West Coast swing kind of hitting them, the fatigues being there. You don't have the big man. You don't have the MVP of the league. So, well, I thought the referees were just an embarrassment to anything related to refereeing. I thought it was more of a product of what the team had left in the tank and what one team was putting out there on the floor, what they could provide all around from an overall professional, serious contender standpoint compared to what the Sixers had on the floor tonight. So you just chalk it up to one of those games and we see what they can do against the Denver Nuggets. If they end up losing against the Nuggets, it's look, whatever happens against the Nuggets at this point, I think we can all tip our caps to what the Sixers did to this point on this West Coast trip and on this road trip in general, and you try and get back on track after that. But all around, like, they bought themselves enough time. And I hate to really say that because it's almost like, well, it doesn't matter at this point, but they kind of bought themselves enough time. They bought themselves a couple ugly ones here and there based off of what they provided because they played so strongly and they got wins after wins after wins, and they showed everyone, hey, we can do this. And you know, at some point it's going to die down and come back to more of a reality. I didn't think that was truly who they were long term. There was going to be a bit of a back to reality type of game at some point. Yeah, maybe it's a 2-game thing. Maybe it's a 1-game thing. I don't know. I'd be very impressed to see them go into Denver on Tuesday. You got a little bit of time. Off Sunday, off Monday, and you play Tuesday night. So if fatigue, and you saw that defensively maybe, if fatigue was such an issue tonight, maybe having that extra day off before Tuesday would allow for them to rejuvenate themselves a bit and get a little bit more of their power back.
Well, Brodes obviously wasn't our night, but obviously no reason to overreact. I think this team is great. We didn't have our superstar. You know, you're gonna have those off nights sometimes, and that's okay. We have to be better, but honestly, I don't think there's any reason to overreact.
I agree. No reason to overreact. I don't think many are. You chalk this up to one of those games, and the situation makes sense. The situation is understandable. I think it's funny, though, because I have that mentality for some of these games. Like, if you lose, let's say the Sixers win 5 of 7 games, and then they lose to the Cleveland Cavaliers on a game that they probably should have won. The reaction normally is, how is it possible that this team lost? They can't lose this game, but I chalk it up to one of those games. It's understandable. It makes sense. You just won 5 of 7. It doesn't really matter about the opponent. It's the NBA. It's the regular season, so you just chalk it up to one of those games. That happens. Statistics will tell you that. The history of the league will tell you that. Teams lose to bad teams. It happens in an NBA journey of regular season basketball. So I see that, and I recognize that, and I don't have issues with it throughout an 82-game season. People don't see that, though. They always have to beat the Cavs. They always have to beat bad teams. Not always. It doesn't play out that way. I want it to be the way that you think it is. I'm not saying you, the caller. I'm saying you in general, to the public, to the people listening, the listening audience. I want it to be that way. It's not, though, and I know it's not. So I think it's funny that tonight is also one of those games where category, if you put it in the category of one of those games, it makes sense, and people are okay with it now. But in other areas where similar mindset, maybe not the same exact circumstance, but similar mindset applied, where one of those games is the quote that you can use to describe it. Oh, they gotta beat the Cavs. They can't lose to the Orlando Magic. Yeah, they can, because great teams that win championships, go back and look through the regular season schedule and results of teams that have won the championship over the 5 years. Go see if you see a loss against a team that they should have beat, because there's multiple of them, and it's a reality of the situation. Don't go look up a Golden State Warriors historic season, by the way, because sure, there's outliers. And by the way, they didn't even win the championship, so that argument would be flawed. Anyway, I digress. Before we end this, I need to let you know about DeSimone Jewelers. I went to them for my fiance's engagement ring, and it was the best decision in my life. They treat you like family, and they are the best in the business. They're a family-owned business with over 40 years of experience. They moved from Jewelers Row to Haddonfield, New Jersey. They customize and they manufacture every ring right there on location, which allows them to beat competitors' prices. They don't use sale tactics. They honestly sit you down and they show you and teach you everything about their rings, and not just rings, jewelry in general. They treat you like family. I've sent so many friends and family members to them, and they all constantly go back. They don't use any other jeweler except for DeSimone Jewelers. And you'll see exactly what I mean when you go in there and you say, hey, Brodes sent me. Tell them that I sent you. Go down in the description. There's way more information, their website, their phone number. Check them out. I go to them for Christmas gifts. I go to them for birthday gifts. I go to DeSimone Jewelers for everything at this point because I had such a stellar experience. And I want you to experience what I did because it changes everything. Every single birthday, anniversary, this and that, you always say, what am I going to get? What am I going to do? Go to DeSimone Jewelers. They will knock it out of the park. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this episode, and I will talk to you next time. That sounded weird. I never said that before. I will see you next time. Now, that sounded more traditional. I apologize.